There are moments in life that split everything into a before and an after. Moments where the person you trusted the most looks you dead in the eyes and says something so cold, so cutting, that you feel the floor fall out from under you. I had one of those moments. I was 26 years old, sitting on the edge of our bed, hands trembling, holding a small white stick with 2 pink lines, and the man I had married, the man I had given everything to, the man who had kissed me on our wedding day and told me I was his whole world, that man looked at me, jaw tight, eyes like stone, and said words I will never forget for the rest of my life. He said, "Get an abortion. I am not ready for this." I did not scream. I did not throw something. I just sat there, completely still, like the sound had been turned off in the entire universe. Because in that one sentence, everything I thought I knew about my life, about my marriage, about the man sleeping next to me every night, all of it cracked straight down the middle. I need to take you back to the beginning, because nothing about what happened makes sense unless you understand who I was before all of it, and who Marcus was, and how 2 people can build an entire life together and still be complete strangers underneath the surface. I grew up in a small town in Georgia. Not the kind of small town that shows up in storybooks. No cobblestone streets, no charming little diners with bottomless coffee. Just a flat, tired, ordinary town where everybody knew your name, but nobody really knew your story. My mother raised my sister and me mostly alone after my father left when I was 7. She worked double shifts at a textile factory on the edge of town, and she came home every night smelling like machine oil and determination. She never complained. Not once. She just kept going, kept feeding us, kept making sure we went to school with clean clothes and lunches packed. And she told us, almost every single day, "Girls, your life is what you make it. Nobody hands you anything." I believed her. I believed that completely. I was a good student, not the kind who made headlines, but the steady, reliable kind who turned in every assignment, who stayed after class to ask questions, who stayed up late reading because I genuinely loved learning. I wanted to be a teacher. I wanted to stand in front of a room full of kids and make them feel the way a few of my teachers made me feel, like the world was bigger than our little town, like their minds were capable of extraordinary things. I got a partial scholarship to a state university 2 hours away from home. I remember packing my entire life into 2 duffel bags and a cardboard box, and my mother stood in the parking lot of our apartment complex and hugged me for a long time without saying anything. When she finally let go, her eyes were wet, but she smiled. "Go build something, Lily," she said. I went. University was overwhelming and thrilling and lonely and beautiful all at once. I made a few friends in my dormitory, quiet, bookish girls like me who liked coffee and late-night conversations and arguing about literature. I studied hard. I waitressed on weekends to cover what my scholarship didn't. I was tired all the time, but I was happy in a way that felt earned, the way happiness feels when you know you worked for it. That is where I met Marcus. He walked into the coffee shop where I waitressed on a rainy Saturday afternoon in October, 3rd year of university. He was tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a dark jacket with the collar turned up against the rain, and he had this energy about him, confident but not arrogant, easy but not careless. He ordered a black coffee and sat by the window and opened a book. I remember thinking from across the room that he looked like someone who had things figured out, like a person who had made peace with himself somewhere along the way. He came back the next Saturday and the one after that. The 4th Saturday, he left his number on the receipt. No note, just the number. I stood there holding that little slip of paper and felt something flutter in my chest that I had not felt in a long time. I texted him that night. We talked until 2 in the morning, and then the morning after that. Within 3 weeks, we were inseparable. Within 6 months, I was in love in a way I had never been before. The kind of love that feels like finally understanding a language you had only been stumbling through your whole life. Marcus was studying business. He was driven and ambitious, and he had plans, big ones, the kind he would lay out in great detail when we were lying in the dark talking about the future. He wanted to start his own company. He wanted to travel. He wanted to build something that lasted, something with his name on it. And somewhere in all those plans, he said, There was room for me. I believed him. We graduated the same spring. He got a job at a corporate consulting firm in Atlanta. I got hired as a third-grade teacher at a small elementary school in the same city. We moved into a 2-bedroom apartment together, and it was the first time in my adult life that I had a space that felt genuinely like home. Plants on the windowsill, books stacked on every surface, his coffee mug next to mine on the kitchen counter every morning. We got married 2 years later on a warm September evening in a backyard ceremony at my mother's house. My sister was my maid of honor. His college friends flew in from 3 different states. My mother cried through the entire ceremony and tried to pretend she wasn't. We danced until midnight. We were 24 years old, and we thought we knew exactly what we were doing. The first year of marriage was good. Not perfect, nothing is, but genuinely good. We fought sometimes about small things. Whose turn it was to do dishes, whether we could afford the nicer apartment we had been looking at, whether we were saving enough. But we always came back to each other. Always found our way back to that warm, easy place where we understood one another. The problems started slowly. So slowly that for a long time I didn't even recognize them as problems. I thought they were just the ordinary friction of 2 people building a shared life. Marcus started working longer hours. That was the first thing. He would leave before I woke up and come home after I had already eaten dinner. He was exhausted all the time, stressed about numbers and clients and deadlines. I understood. I gave him space. I tried to be supportive without being demanding. I kept the apartment clean and cooked dinner and saved his plate and did not complain. But slowly, quietly, something started shifting. He stopped asking about my day. He stopped reaching for my hand during movies. He stopped laughing at the silly things that used to make us both laugh. He came to bed late and fell asleep immediately, and in the mornings, he was gone before I had opened my eyes. I told myself it was stress. I told myself it was temporary. I told myself that love goes through seasons, and this was just a cold one, and spring would come. I was teaching full-time, planning lessons, grading papers, attending school meetings, and coming home to a man who felt increasingly like a stranger passing through. But I stayed busy, and I stayed hopeful, and I told myself things were fine. Then I found out I was pregnant. It was a Tuesday evening in March. I had picked up a pregnancy test at the pharmacy on my way home, almost on a whim. My period was a few days late, and I was probably overthinking it, I told myself. I had taken the test almost casually, standing in our bathroom in the late afternoon light, fully expecting a single line. 2 lines appeared. I stood there for a very long time. I sat down on the edge of the bathtub. I looked at those 2 lines until they blurred. And then, slowly, something unfamiliar started to rise up through the shock. Something quiet and warm. Something that felt, underneath all the fear, a little bit like wonder. I was going to have a baby. I held that knowledge inside me for the 2 hours it took Marcus to get home. I practiced what I would say. I thought about how I would tell him. I lit the candles on the dining table, and I put on the playlist we used to listen to when we were dating, and I made his favorite dinner, and I waited. When he walked in, he looked tired the way he always looked tired. Shoulders heavy, tie loosened, eyes carrying something distant. He dropped his bag by the door, and went to the kitchen and poured himself a glass of water, and only then looked at me properly. "You look strange," he said. "I need to tell you something," I said. He sat down at the table. I sat across from him. I put the pregnancy test between us on the table, face up, 2 lines visible. I watched his eyes drop to it. I watched his face change. And then I watched the warmth drain out of it completely. He was quiet for a long time. Too long. The candles flickered. The music played softly from the speaker in the corner. Some old song we had danced to once, back when we danced. He did not pick up the test. He just stared at the table with an expression I had never seen on his face before. Something tight and closed and very, very far away. "Marcus," I said softly. "Say something." He looked up at me, and his voice, when it came, was flat and controlled and utterly without warmth. "Get an abortion," he said. "I am not ready for this." I have replayed that moment thousands of times in the years since. The candles, the music, the 2 pink lines, his face, those 7 words. I have replayed it, trying to understand how the man who cried at our wedding, who called me his home, who talked about building something that lasted, how that man looked at the news that we had made a life together and said those 7 words like he was declining an invitation to a party he didn't want to attend. "What?" I heard myself say. My voice came out small. "I have told you, Lily. My career is at a critical point. I cannot do this right now. We cannot afford it. We are not ready." "You said we," I noticed even in my fog. "We are not ready." "Yes, we. But I did not ask for this to happen, Marcus. Neither did you. It happened, and I know how it happened," he snapped, and the sharpness of it silenced me instantly. "I'm not blaming you. I'm telling you what needs to happen next. There are options. This is not the end of anything." I sat there looking at him across the table with the candles burning down between us, and I understood, in a way I had never understood before, that I did not actually know this man, that the person I had been sharing a bed and a life and a last name with had corners I had never seen, depths I had never touched, and what lived in those depths was not what I had believed. I did not argue with him that night. I lay down on top of the covers, fully dressed, and I stared at the ceiling, and I cried silently. The kind of crying where your body shakes, but no sound comes out, because somewhere deep in your chest, the grief is too big and too private for noise. He slept on the couch. The next few days were unbearable, in a very quiet way. He went to work, I went to work. We moved around each other in the apartment like chess pieces on a board, carefully avoiding collision. He brought it up twice more, calm, rational, controlled, laying out reasons like a business case. The timing, the finances, his career trajectory, my career trajectory. The apartment was too small. We were not emotionally prepared. He had done research on the procedure, he said, as if that was somehow helpful. Each time he brought it up, I listened, and each time something deeper inside me hardened. Because the truth was, and I knew it even then, even in the fog of shock and grief and anger, the truth was that I wanted this baby. I had not expected to want it, had not planned for it, had not seen it coming. But from the moment those 2 lines appeared, something in me had already reached out toward this tiny, uncertain, miraculous thing and held on. I could not explain it rationally. Marcus would not have accepted an irrational explanation anyway. But it was real. It was the most real thing I had felt in months. On the 4th night, I told him. We were in the kitchen. He was making coffee. I was standing by the counter watching him, and I said, quietly and clearly, "I am not getting an abortion, Marcus." He turned to look at me. His jaw tightened. "Lily?" "No," I said, and the steadiness in my own voice surprised me. "I have heard everything you said. I have listened to every reason, and my answer is no. I am having this baby." The silence that followed was enormous. He set down the coffee mug very carefully, like he was trying not to break it. He looked at me for a long moment. And then he said, in a voice that was very quiet and very controlled, "Then I think you need to understand what that means." "What does it mean?" I asked. He didn't answer. He just left the kitchen. 3 days later, he told me he was moving out. Temporarily, he said, to give us both space to think. He packed a bag, just one, just the essentials, and he walked out of the apartment we had shared, and he did not look back. I stood at the window and watched his car pull out of the parking lot. I had one hand pressed flat against the glass, and one hand pressed flat against my stomach, and I stood there until his taillights disappeared around the corner. And then I sat down in the middle of our living room floor, among the plants and the books and the 2 coffee mugs still sitting side by side on the counter, and I let myself fall apart. I fell apart thoroughly and completely. I cried until I couldn't anymore. I called my mother and could barely speak, and she stayed on the phone with me for 2 hours, mostly silent, just breathing, just there. My sister called back 20 minutes after my mother hung up. My friend Dana, who I had told everything to, showed up at my door at 10 o'clock that night with takeout containers and did not leave until I was asleep. The weeks that followed were the loneliest I have ever known, and I have known some lonely. Marcus called occasionally, always polite, always careful, always keeping his distance behind a wall of measured words. He was thinking things through, he said. He needed time. He was not sure what he wanted. He did not ask how I was feeling. He did not ask about the pregnancy. When I mentioned once that I had a doctor's appointment coming up, he said, "Okay," and changed the subject. I went to every appointment alone. I remember the first ultrasound so clearly. I was 8 weeks along. The technician was a quiet woman with kind eyes, who showed me the screen without any fanfare, just tilted it toward me gently and pointed. And there it was, this tiny, unbelievable flicker. A heartbeat, so small, so steady, so completely indifferent to everything that was falling apart around it. The technician handed me tissues without comment, the way people in that room must do many times a day, understanding that tears can mean 10 different things, and most of them are too big to explain. I drove home alone. I put the printout of the ultrasound on the refrigerator, with a magnet shaped like a sunflower. I stood in front of it for a long time. "We're going to be okay," I told the picture. "I don't know how yet, but we are." My mother drove up the following weekend and stayed for 3 days. She helped me rearrange the second bedroom. She helped me make a list of what I would need. She did not say a bad word about Marcus, not once, even though I could see in her face that she wanted to. She just moved around my apartment with that quiet, steady energy of hers, doing practical things, making coffee, washing dishes, doing what she had always done, making sure I had what I needed to keep going. My school gave me a small baby shower. 15 teachers crowded into the break room on a Friday afternoon with balloons and a sheet cake and an embarrassing number of tiny onesies. I was 5 months along by then, visibly so, and my students had started asking me questions with the guileless directness that 8-year-olds are famous for. "Is the baby a boy or a girl? Will you still be our teacher? Can the baby come to school with you?" I laughed more in those classrooms than I did anywhere else during that time. I had filed for divorce. It had not been a dramatic decision. It had been a slow, quiet one, the way most real decisions actually are. One morning I woke up, and I lay in bed, and I thought about what my life looked like, what my son's life would look like. I had found out at 20 weeks that it was a boy, a son, my son, and I thought about the man who had told me to erase him, and something in me simply closed a door. I called a lawyer that afternoon. Marcus was served the papers 2 weeks later. His voice was different than I expected. Not angry, not controlled, but something rawer than both. Almost lost. "This is really what you want?" he asked. "I want a partner," I said. "Someone who chooses us. If that's not you, then yes, this is what I want." He was quiet. "I made a mistake," he said finally. What I said, the way I handled it? "I know," I said. "But Eli is already here, Marcus. He has been here for 20 weeks, growing inside me, and you have not asked about him once." Another silence. "You named him already?" "Yes. Eli. Eli James." I heard him exhale, long and slow, like something releasing. But I did not let myself soften. I had been soft for a long time. I had made space for his uncertainty, while my own certainty grew louder and clearer every day. I was done bending myself into shakes that made it easier for him to stay comfortable, while I built a life alone. "Take the time you need," I said, "but I cannot wait for you to decide whether you want to be a father. Eli is going to need one either way. I hope someday you choose to be his." I hung up. The divorce was finalized when I was 7 months pregnant. We split our joint accounts evenly. He kept the consulting job. I kept the apartment. We signed papers in a lawyer's office on a gray December morning, and I wore a maternity dress, the color of pale blue, and I was calm the entire time, in a way that felt less like strength and more like acceptance. Eli James Rose was born on a Tuesday in February. He came into the world at 6:37 in the morning, furious and loud, announcing himself with a cry that filled the delivery room and broke through every wall I had built around my heart over the previous months. My mother was there. My sister was there. Dana stood at the foot of the bed with tears streaming down her face, and she didn't even pretend to be composed. I held him, and I looked at his face, red and scrunched and furious and perfect, and I said hello to him, very quietly, just for the two of us. "Hi, baby. I've been waiting for you." The first year of Eli's life is a beautiful blur, a stunning, exhausting, terrifying, glorious blur. I went back to teaching after 8 weeks of maternity leave because I had no choice. I had a mortgage and formula and daycare to afford, and I was doing it all on one income. My mother came and stayed for the first 2 months. My sister drove up on alternating weekends. Dana showed up on Tuesday evenings with dinner, reliably, every single week for the entire first year. I do not know what I would have done without these women. Eli was a good baby in the way that all babies are also sometimes terrible. He slept in chunks and then didn't sleep at all. He had opinions about everything, about the angle at which he was held, about which song I sang, about the specific brand of pacifier that was acceptable. He laughed for the first time at 11 weeks, at absolutely nothing, in the middle of the night, and I was so delighted, I started crying. Marcus sent money, child support organized through the lawyer. It arrived on time, every month, without variation. He did not call, he did not visit, he did not send so much as a birthday card when Eli turned 1. His absence was complete and consistent, and after a while I stopped being angry about it and started just living around it the way you learn to live around any unchangeable thing. I threw Eli the most spectacular first birthday party that a 1-year-old has ever experienced, and definitely not appreciated. Balloons everywhere, a smash cake shaped like a duck, my entire collection of people crammed into my apartment making noise and laughing and passing Eli around like the happiest little parcel in the world. In the pictures from that day, I am beaming, genuinely, completely beaming, not performing it, not pushing through it. Actually, truly happy, messy and tired and happy in a way that had nothing to do with anyone who was not in that room. Eli's second year brought words. First it was mama, which is what I was, and then it was no, which he applied to absolutely everything. And then it was more, and then suddenly, as if a dam had broken, words came flooding in from everywhere. He named everything he saw. He narrated his own life in real time. He pointed at things and looked at me expectantly, waiting for me to confirm that, yes, that is a tree, and yes, that is a bird, and yes, that dog is very fluffy, and you are right to be excited about it. I read to him every night without exception. We had a routine. Bath, pajamas, 3 books, 1 song, lights out. Some nights he fell asleep halfway through the second book, heavy and warm against my side, and I would finish reading out loud anyway, alone in the dim room with his soft breathing filling the quiet. He was the most important thing I had ever done. That is not a metaphor. That is just the plain and simple truth. Year 3 brought preschool, and with preschool came the questions I had been bracing for. Why doesn't Eli have a daddy? Where is his daddy? How come Leon has a daddy and Eli doesn't? I had thought about this a great deal. I had read things and asked people and sat with my own feelings about it extensively, and I had decided that I would tell him the truth. Not all of it, not the painful, complicated, grown-up truth, but the simple, honest version that a 3-year-old could hold. Your daddy lives far away, I told him one evening when the question came up. He is not a part of our daily life, but you have so many people who love you, Eli. You have me and Grandma and Aunt Sarah and Dana. You have so much love around you. He was sitting in his booster seat at the dinner table, a green bean held in one hand, considering. Is Daddy nice? He asked. I think I said carefully that your daddy is trying to figure some things out. He seemed to accept this. He ate his green bean. He moved on. I sat with the answer for a long time after he went to bed that night. I hoped it was true. I chose to believe it was true. At 3.5, Eli developed an obsession with dinosaurs that consumed his entire personality. He knew things about dinosaurs that I had never known in my life, and could not retain no matter how many times he explained them to me. He corrected me constantly. He was merciless about it. He would look at me with this expression of profound, patient disappointment. How could I not know that the Spinosaurus was longer than the T-Rex? And then explain it to me again from the beginning. I took him to a natural history museum 3 hours away from home, and we spent 5 hours in the dinosaur exhibit, and I thought he might actually evaporate from joy. On the drive home, he fell asleep in his car seat with his head tilted to one side and one fist loosely closed on his lap, and a tiny smear of the cotton candy I had absolutely definitely not bought him, still visible at the corner of his mouth. I drove in silence, and the late afternoon light came through the windows at a low angle, and I thought, Very simply, I am happy. Whatever happened, whatever it cost, whatever is still hard, I am happy. I was 30 years old. It had been almost 4 years since that night with the candles and the 2 pink lines and the 7 words that changed everything. I had rebuilt my life in a way I had not known I was capable of. I had refinanced my apartment. I had gotten a small raise at school. I had started taking evening classes toward a master's degree in education, 1 class at a time, slowly, the way you do everything when you have a child and a full-time job and a life to run. I had a small, close circle of people who I trusted completely. I had a routine that worked, most days. I had a son who was funny and kind and extremely opinionated about dinosaurs. I was not looking for anything else. I was not lonely exactly. I was full, not in every way, but in enough ways to feel grounded. And then one Thursday afternoon in late October, I walked into the Natural History Museum again, this time for a school field trip with my second graders, and I met a man named Daniel. He was a museum educator. He ran the children's programming. He was standing in front of a room full of 7-year-olds, explaining the Cretaceous period with a level of enthusiasm that made even me interested, and my students were absolutely riveted. He had this quality, a warmth, a realness that pulled people toward him without any effort on his part. He was just genuinely, completely present. After the program, he came and found me to check in about how it had gone for our class. We talked for 10 minutes. He was easy to talk to in the way that some people just are, and when it was time to go, he said, "I hope we see your class again." And I thought about it all the way back on the bus. He emailed the school 2 weeks later through the Official Education Partnership Program. My colleague who handled field trips forwarded it to me because she was out sick. I replied. He replied to my reply. Within a week, we were emailing each other about things that had nothing to do with second graders or museums. We met for coffee. We met for coffee again. We walked around a farmer's market on a Saturday morning and talked for 3 hours. I told him about Eli on the second coffee. He asked thoughtful questions and did not make it awkward. The third coffee, he brought me a book he had thought I would like, a novel about a woman rebuilding her life, and he had written in the front cover, carefully, in his neat handwriting, "For someone who seems to be doing that beautifully." I stood in the coffee shop parking lot and read that inscription 4 times. I brought him home to meet Eli after 2 months of dating. I was terrified. Eli was suspicious. Daniel crouched down to Eli's level immediately, without fanfare, and said, "I hear you know a lot about dinosaurs. I need your help. What can you tell me about the Spinosaurus?" Eli's eyes went wide with the opportunity. They talked for 45 minutes. I sat across the room watching my son hold court about prehistoric creatures with this quiet, steady man who listened like every word mattered, and something shifted in me. Something that had been held very carefully in place for a very long time, slowly, gently, let go. Daniel became a part of our life gradually and then all at once. He was good at it in a way that didn't feel performed. He showed up consistently. He was honest. He was patient with Eli's moods and with my guardedness, both of which could be considerable. He never tried to replace something or fill a space. He just added himself quietly to what was already there. Eli decided on his own timeline that Daniel was acceptable, then that he was good. Then, and this happened one evening when I was washing dishes and couldn't see Eli's face, Eli said entirely unprompted, "Daniel, do you like living with us?" Daniel had been staying over with increasing frequency. He glanced at me across the kitchen, and I caught his eye and waited. "I love being with you guys," Daniel said. "You're my favorite people." "Mine too," Eli said seriously and went back to his drawing. I turned back to the sink and pressed my forehead against the cabinet and breathed. We moved in together when Eli was 4.5. We made it a whole event. Eli helped pack boxes and labeled them, mostly incorrectly, but very enthusiastically, and chose which shelf his dinosaur collection would go on in the new apartment. He gave Daniel very specific instructions about the kitchen, which Daniel followed exactly, and reported this to me afterward with great satisfaction. Life, which had been quietly building, felt like it had found its shape. Eli turned 5 in February. We threw him a dinosaur party because obviously, and he wore a T-Rex hat for 6 hours straight and refused to take it off even at the dinner table. My mother came, my sister came with her husband and their toddler, Dana came with her partner, Daniel stood at the grill in our backyard, turning hot dogs in a T-Rex apron, that Eli had insisted he wear, and he looked so ridiculous and so completely content that I had to look away for a moment. The party wound down. The guests went home. Eli, destroyed by sugar and excitement, fell asleep on the couch at 7:30 with his mouth open and his T-Rex hat still on. I draped a blanket over him and stood there looking at him for a moment in the quiet. 5 years old. 5 years. It was the following Saturday that Marcus came. I had known in the abstract that this might happen someday. My lawyer had kept our contact information current in the child support system, and technically Marcus had always had the right to be involved. I had never closed that door, legally or otherwise, even when it felt absurd to keep it open. But he had never walked through it. Not once in 5 years. Not a call, not a card, not a message. So when my phone rang that Friday evening and the name on the screen was Marcus, I stood in the kitchen for a very long time before I picked up. Lily. His voice sounded different. Older. Rougher around the edges. Marcus. He stopped. Started again. Does Eli know about me? He knows he has a father, I said carefully. He knows you don't live with us. Silence. I would like to meet him, Marcus said, if that's something you would consider. If it's not too late. There was so much I could have said in that moment. 5 years of things I could have said. But what I thought, standing in my kitchen in the house I had built, was Eli's face. I thought about the question he had asked me at 3. Is Daddy nice? I think your daddy is trying to figure some things out. It's not up to me, I said. It's up to Eli. He'll need to be told. And he's going to need time. I know, Marcus said. I know that. I need you to know that I know how wrong I was. About everything. All of it. It took me a long time to understand that, but I understand it now. I did not ask him what had changed. That was not my story to carry anymore. I'll talk to him, I said, and then we'll see. We arranged for Marcus to come the following Saturday, late morning, just for an hour. I spoke to Eli the night before. I sat with him on his bed after his bath, and I told him, simply and carefully, that his daddy wanted to meet him, that Daddy had made some mistakes a long time ago, but wanted to try to do better. That Eli did not have to do anything he didn't want to do, that no matter what, I was right there. Eli was quiet for a moment, processing. Then he said, Does he know about dinosaurs? I honestly don't know, I said. I'll have to teach him, Eli said, with the weary patience of someone who has been educating adults his entire life. Yes, I said, pressing my lips together to keep from smiling. You probably will. He came at 11 o'clock. I heard his car in the driveway, and I stood in the living room and took a breath. Eli was sitting on the couch with one of his dinosaur books open on his lap, performing casualness in the way that 5-year-olds do. Too still, too deliberate, giving themselves away completely. I opened the door. Marcus looked older, thinner. There were lines around his eyes I didn't remember, and something in his expression that had not been there when I knew him. A kind of quietness, like a man who has been through something and come out the other side with less noise in him. He looked past me, and I watched his face when he saw Eli. I had thought about this moment. I had tried to prepare for it in all the abstract ways you prepare for something you cannot actually know. But I had not fully anticipated what it would look like to watch a man see his own child for the first time at 5 years old. I had not anticipated the color leaving his face, the way his whole body seemed to go very still, the way his jaw worked once without producing a sound. He went pale, visibly, completely pale. Because Eli looked like him. He had looked like me when he was born, my nose, my mouth, but in the past year something had shifted in his face, and he had his father's eyes, exactly, the same shape, the same dark, direct gaze, the same slight furrow in the brow when he was concentrating. Marcus stood there on my front step, looking at the small version of his own face, sitting on my couch, holding a book about dinosaurs, and for a moment he could not speak at all. Eli looked up from his book and regarded the man in the doorway with the same grave, measuring assessment he gave to everything new in his world. Are you my daddy? Eli asked. Marcus's voice, when it came, was barely above a whisper. Yes, he said, I am. Eli considered this. He made a decision the way 5-year-olds make decisions, with the full and simple authority of someone who has not yet learned to second-guess themselves. "I'm teaching my friend Daniel about dinosaurs," he said. "But I can teach you too if you want." Marcus walked into my house. He sat down on the couch next to my son. He looked at the book Eli held out to him, a full-color illustrated guide to the Jurassic period. And he looked at it like it was the most important document he had ever been handed. "Tell me everything," Marcus said. I stepped back into the kitchen. I stood at the counter with both hands wrapped around a coffee mug, and I listened to Eli's voice rise and fall in the living room. The bright, confident voice of a boy who has been loved and knows it, explaining to a stranger how the world worked 200 million years ago. I did not feel triumphant. I did not feel vindicated. I did not feel any of the things I might have expected to feel in that moment, looking back at all the candles and the pink lines and the 7 words and the gray December morning in the lawyer's office and the first birthday party and the 5 years of mornings I had gotten up and kept going. What I felt was something much quieter than any of those things. I felt at peace. Not because he had come, not because he had seen what he had walked away from and gone pale, but because standing in that kitchen, listening to my son's voice, I understood something completely and clearly. I had not been waiting for this. I had not built my life in the direction of this moment. I had built it toward Eli, toward myself, toward the people who had shown up and stayed. And this moment, whatever it turned out to be, was just something that was happening now, in a life that was already whole. Marcus came back the following Saturday, and the one after that. He was careful and consistent, and he asked Eli questions, and he remembered the answers. He was not trying to be anything more than what he was. A man beginning very late, from the beginning, trying to learn his way around a small person who already had a very full life. Eli accepted this. In the matter-of-fact way he accepted most things. He had a daddy now, the way other kids at school had daddies. Marcus lived in a different house. Daniel lived in their house. Both of these things were true, and neither of them canceled the other out. Children have a clarity about love that adults complicate beyond recognition. One afternoon, about 2 months into Marcus's visits, Eli came to find me in the kitchen after Marcus had left. He climbed up onto the counter stool and sat there with his feet dangling, and he looked at me very seriously. "Mama," he said. "Yeah, Bug," I said. "I think Daddy is sad sometimes." I looked at my son, 5 years old, watching everything. "I think you might be right," I said. "Why?" I thought about this carefully. "I think," I said, "because he missed things, important things, and he knows it." Eli was quiet. He swung his feet back and forth. He thought about this with that little furrow in his brow. "I told him about the Spinosaurus," Eli said finally, "so he doesn't have to miss that one." I had to look away. "That was really kind of you," I managed. "I know," Eli said, and slid off the stool and went to find his toys. There are things I think about now, in the quieter moments, when the morning light comes through the kitchen windows, and Eli is eating cereal, and Daniel is pouring coffee, and the ordinary, extraordinary business of daily life is underway. I think about the woman I was at 26, sitting on the edge of a bed with 2 pink lines and a fracturing world. I think about all the ways that night could have gone differently, all the versions of myself that might have made a different choice in a different direction. But I do not regret any of it. Not the divorce, not the years alone, not the hard mornings or the tight months or the field trips I chaperoned on 4 hours of sleep. Not a single bit of it. Because every single one of those choices, including the one I made when I looked across that candlelit table and said, silently in my own chest, no. Every single one of them led here, to this kitchen, to this morning, to this son who is currently explaining to Daniel, with great urgency, that the cereal box has a dinosaur on it, and Daniel needs to look at it right now, immediately. This is important. Daniel looks. He asks the right questions. Eli is delighted. I watch them and I feel the ordinary completeness of it, and I think, this is what I built. This is what I chose when I chose myself and my son over the easy thing, over the thing someone else had decided for me. And I think about Marcus, coming every Saturday now, learning his way into something he walked away from, carrying that weight the way he deserves to carry it, but also trying, actually trying. And Eli, generous and clear-eyed as only children can be, teaching him about Spinosauruses so he doesn't have to miss that one. I think about my mother standing in a parking lot years ago, saying, "Go build something, Lily." I think I did. I think I really truly did. Not everything that falls apart stays fallen. Not everything that ends is a loss. Sometimes, the thing that breaks you open is actually breaking you free. Free from the version of yourself who was waiting for someone else to decide if your life was worth living. Free toward the one who already knows the answer. My name is Lily Rose. My son is 5 years old, and he is the loudest, brightest, most wonderful thing that has ever happened to me. I am building a life on my own terms with the people who chose to be here, and it is not perfect, but it is mine. And I would do every single hard thing again, every single one. Where are you watching this from, and what time is it there? Drop it in the comments. I love knowing where in the world these stories are reaching. End question. If someone you loved ever made you feel like your greatest blessing was a mistake, how did you find the strength to keep going? If this story stayed with you, hit subscribe. Lily Calm Stories drops new narrations every day, and every single one is written for the person who needs it most. You know who you are. We'll see you next time.